She was standing at the checkout counter of Hartley's Organic Market in Rittenhouse Square, her night shift scrub still on, a faint mark marring the fabric near her collar. She hadn't taken a moment to notice her hair, pulled back by a band that was losing its hold, or her sneakers, worn smooth on both heels. 4 items rested on the conveyor belt: infant formula, oatmeal, a bag of apples, and a small carton of orange juice. The cashier rang them up with deliberate slowness. Tamara observed the accumulating total on the display screen, then reached into her front pocket, producing a neatly arranged sheaf of coupons she'd meticulously cut that morning before her shift concluded. The woman behind her let out a sigh, a sound far from subtle. It was the kind of exhalation designed to be heard, to impress upon someone the burden of their own existence in the path of another. Then the woman spoke. The individual positioned behind her was Vivian Ashford Cole, age 44, the spouse of Gerald Cole, whose name adorned the facades of 3 residential high-rises in downtown Philadelphia. She carried a leather satchel the hue of dark honey, the sort that eschews visible price tags, for its cost is intrinsically understood. A diamond gleamed on her left hand, catching the overhead illumination with every subtle movement of her fingers. A perfume preceded her arrival, lingering in the air long after she had departed. She was the archetype of a woman who had mastered the art of disguising cruelty as solicitousness long ago. Her gaze fell upon the coupons in Tamara's hand. It then shifted to the scrubs. Finally, it settled on the 4 items on the belt: formula, oatmeal, apples, juice. She did not lower her tone. She did not lean in. Addressing the cashier directly, yet audibly enough for every patron within 3 adjacent registers to hear, she declared, "Some individuals truly ought to frequent establishments that align with their financial capacity. There are numerous discount retailers within easy walking distance." Her words landed in the checkout aisle with the impact of a physical blow, not due to their volume, but their precise aim. The cashier, a young woman named Monique, 22, and on her first professional engagement after community college, froze, a coupon halfway to the scanner. Her eyes flicked from Tamara to Vivienne, then back to the register. She remained silent. Having been employed at Hartley's for 5 months, she had already discerned which customers the establishment deemed worthy of protection and which it did not. Tamara offered no outward reaction to Vivienne. She did not return the coupons to her pocket. She made no move to step aside or offer an apology for the perceived delay. She presented the next coupon to Monique and simply waited. She waited as one might when they have already resolved not to be swayed by another's judgment of their place. Vivian watched her, the absence of a reaction appearing to intensify something within her. She was the sort of person who required a response with the same urgency a flame needs air. She turned back to Monique. "Is there an express lane for patrons who actually settle the full amount? Because this is consuming an inordinate amount of time." Monique scanned the coupon, her hand exhibiting a slight tremor. She kept her gaze averted. A gentleman in the adjacent aisle glanced briefly in their direction, then returned his attention to his basket. A woman with a toddler in her cart feigned an intense interest in the candy display beside the register. Another shopper, in their mid-60s, spectacles suspended by a chain around their neck, met Vivian's gaze directly for 2 full seconds before looking away, uttering nothing. The silence of the observers. The particular hush of individuals who perceive an impropriety but opt for the familiar solace of non-involvement. It is a silence most people have inhabited at least once in their lives, on one side or the other. Tamara handed over the final coupon. Her expression remained unchanged, neither tightening nor softening. It was the same composed, even demeanor she had possessed upon entering the store. She had navigated environments where individuals regarded her with the same scrutiny as Vivian was now. She had learned that such looks invariably revealed more about the giver than the receiver. She had also acquired another insight, that reacting to such scrutiny lent it credence, and she had long since ceased bearing the weight of others' opinions. Monique concluded the scanning process. The final sum materialized on the screen. Tamara reached into her bag for her debit card, and it was at this juncture that Vivian addressed the cashier once more. I wish to speak with a manager. This queue has been impeded for an excessive duration, and I have pressing engagements." She delivered this with the measured, official tone of someone lodging a formal complaint, an expectation of immediate acquiescence born from a history of always receiving it. Monique activated the call button without acknowledging anyone. A small red light illuminated above register 4. Tamara did not turn around. She stood with her card in hand, awaiting the completion of the transaction. She was not inclined to hasten. She was not inclined to recede. She would stand in this queue and purchase her provisions, as every other individual in this establishment had the right to do, and she would not feign gratitude or apology for the privilege of doing so. The red light pulsed. From the rear of the store, footsteps began to advance toward the front. No one at register 4 uttered a word. The only audible sounds were the gentle hum of the refrigerated display cases lining the far wall and the distinct beep of a scanner 2 aisles away, where the rest of the store proceeded as if unaffected by the unfolding scene. Yet, something was occurring. Every person situated near that counter recognized it. They simply had not yet determined their course of action. Derek Hillman emerged from the back office 30 seconds later. In his mid-30s, he wore khaki trousers and a navy polo shirt with a name tag clipped to it, the store logo embroidered above the left breast pocket. He had been managing this Hartley's branch for 2 years, excelling in the manner of certain adept managers, ensuring shelves were stocked, staff appropriately scheduled, complaints minimized, and high-value clientele satisfied, especially the high-value clientele. Hartley's operated a tiered membership program, with platinum members spending a minimum of $8,000 annually. Vivian Ashford Cole was a platinum member. He identified her immediately, not necessarily by her face, but by her bearing, her accessory, her jewelry. The posture of a woman accustomed to the environment reconfiguring itself around her desires. He had been trained, not through explicit instruction, but through practical experience, to facilitate such recalibrations with utmost seamlessness. He surveyed the register, then Tamara, then the coupons Monique had already processed. "Ma'am," he began, a smile gracing his lips, "I apologize for the delay. We do, in fact, have a secondary register available over here where we can process your coupons separately. It might prove faster for everyone." It was the kind of smile that possessed the correct form, but lacked any genuine warmth. He was not resolving an issue. He was subtly redirecting one customer away from the gaze of another, a maneuver universally understood at that counter. Tamara regarded him. "I am in line," she stated. "I was here first. I will conclude here." 7 words. No further elaboration. No justification offered. Delivered with the certainty of stating a self-evident fact. Derek faltered, his gaze shifting to Vivian, then back to Tamara. "Of course, ma'am. I simply thought it might be more convenient for you." Tamara reiterated, "I will finish here." Vivian shifted her weight, her objective not yet achieved. The manager had appeared, but the queue remained unmoved. The woman in scrubs had not yielded. A subtle tension tightened her features, the veneer of politeness cracking just enough to reveal an underlying edge. She addressed Derek, but her words were clearly intended for Tamara and audible to everyone in the aisle, including the small girl seated in the shopping cart behind Tamara's hip, Zuri Osai, 4 years old. Zuri, with her brown skin and wide dark eyes, clutched a stuffed bear missing an ear. Though too young to comprehend the woman's pronouncements, she possessed the sensitivity of a child to atmospheric shifts, sensing the pressure change in the room. She looked up at her mother. Tamara's jaw clenched briefly, a singular motion, then relaxed. She reached down and adjusted the strap of Zuri's overalls, her gaze remaining fixed on the register screen. Tamara Osai, 31, worked the night shift at Jefferson Memorial Hospital from 11 at night until 7 in the morning, 5 nights a week, earning $19.40 per hour. Her rent for a 1-bedroom apartment in Germantown, where Zuri slept in the bedroom while Tamara occupied a fold-out couch in the living room, was $1,150 per month. Childcare expenses amounted to $680 monthly. Zuri's overnight caregiver was Mrs. Patterson, a retired teacher residing 2 floors below, whose rates were lower than any licensed facility as she herself had raised 4 children alone and understood the need for assistance when funds were scarce. Following each shift, Tamara collected Zuri at 7:15, made a brief stop for necessary groceries, and was home by 8 o'clock. She slept from 8:30 until 1 in the afternoon, then was awake with Zuri at 10 at night when the cycle recommenced. She had been awake for 22 hours. She had not sat down since 3 in the morning, when she took her break in the staff room and ate a granola bar while standing, as all the chairs were occupied. She did not appear fatigued. She presented as a woman who had ceased measuring her life by her restfulness and had begun measuring it by her daughter's needs. And at that moment, her daughter required apples, oatmeal, formula, and juice, and her mother was determined to remain in this line until they were purchased. Monique completed the transaction. The screen displayed a total of $23.14 after coupon deductions. Tamara inserted her card. The machine emitted a beep. She placed the bags into the cart beside Zuri and turned to depart. Approximately 10 steps away, near the produce display where organic lettuces were arranged in neat rows under a misting system, a man in a gray pullover, his reading glasses perched on his forehead, set down his shopping basket. He had been standing remarkably still for the preceding 3 minutes. He had heard every word spoken. He straightened and began walking toward Register 4. Malcolm Bridgewater, 52 years old, wore no attire that would betray his identity. A gray pullover, dark jeans, and a pair of brown leather shoes that were clean but not new. No watch, no ring, no name tag, no insignia, no identifying marker. He appeared as a man stopping for groceries on a Saturday morning, which was precisely what he was doing. His basket contained 6 items: spinach, 2 lemons, a jar of olives, bread, a block of Parmesan cheese, and a bottle of sparkling water. He had been deliberating between 2 types of olive oil at the rear of the store when he first heard the voice, not Tamara's voice, the other one. The voice that carried across the store with an unnerving clarity, not due to its volume, but its directed intention. He returned the olive oil to the shelf. He listened. He remained motionless for nearly a full minute. Then he picked up his basket and walked slowly toward the front of the store. He did not hurry. He did not elevate his chin or square his shoulders. He moved with the deliberate gait of a man who had already made a decision and saw no reason to announce it. He reached Register 4 just as Tamara was turning to leave. He placed his basket on the belt behind where hers had been. He looked at Vivian, then at Derek, then back at Vivian. "I believe this woman was here first," he stated. "She was paying for her groceries and, from what I overheard, she was the only individual in this line who did not owe anyone an apology." Vivian regarded him. She took in the pullover, the reading glasses, the absence of any adornment on his wrist or hands that would suggest status. She smiled, the kind of smile bestowed upon someone already categorized and dismissed. "And you are?" she inquired. Malcolm did not answer the question. He turned to Derek. "Is there an issue with how that customer was paying?" Derek opened his mouth, but no sound emerged immediately. He looked at Vivian, then back at Malcolm. "Sir, we were merely attempting to accommodate everyone and maintain the flow of the line." Malcolm countered. "She had coupons. She paid. The line moved. What precisely needed accommodating?" Derek offered no response. Malcolm Bridgewater had not always been the kind of man to approach a confrontation in a grocery store. There had been a time when he would have acted precisely like the gentleman in the adjacent aisle, glanced over, looked away, and rationalized it as none of his concern. He had grown up on 56th Street in West Philadelphia. His mother, Gwendolyn Bridgewater, had worked for the city sanitation department for 27 years. She raised 3 children in a modest 2-bedroom row house where the radiator in the back room never functioned correctly and the front steps bore a crack down the middle that remained unrepaired. She departed for work before dawn and returned home carrying the scent of the truck. Every evening, before preparing dinner, she scrubbed her hands until they were raw, as she did not wish her children to witness the toll of her labor on her skin. She had been subjected to the same sort of scrutiny that Tamara had just endured on countless occasions, more than Malcolm could readily recall. In shops, at school events, at the doctor's office where she paid in cash due to insurance limitations. As a boy, he had stood beside her, observing people's eyes traverse from her uniform to her footwear, to her face, and he had watched his mother continue walking as if those judgmental gazes were non-existent. She never voiced any complaint about it. She didn't need to. He absorbed everything essential from the upright posture of her spine, the steadiness of her voice, and the resolute manner in which she placed one foot in front of the other, as though no one in the room possessed the power to impede her progress. He became a surgeon, dedicating 20 years to operating rooms across 3 medical facilities in the Philadelphia area. He now held the position of chairman of the board at Jefferson Memorial Hospital, overseeing a system comprising 3 institutions, employing 4,200 individuals and managing an annual budget of $1.2 billion. He had not divulged any of this information to anyone in the store, nor did he intend to. He had not stepped forward out of a sense of personal importance. He had stepped forward because of what he had witnessed: a woman purchasing groceries, another woman attempting to belittle her for doing so, and a manager aligning himself with the cruelty because it was presented under the guise of a platinum membership, supported by a gathering of people who had deemed it less burdensome to focus on the candy display than to voice a single dissenting word. He did not know who Tamara was. He had never encountered her before. He was unaware that she was employed at his hospital. He did not know that she had held his mother's hand 3 months prior in a room he had never entered. He knew nothing of her beyond what he had just observed, and what he had observed was sufficient. Vivian continued to smile, the kind of smile that maintains its form when the person behind it has not yet grasped that the room's dynamic has shifted. Malcolm offered no reciprocal smile. He stood at register 4, his basket on the belt, his hands at his sides, regarding her with a stillness that required no volume to convey its presence. Tamara had paused near the exit, adjusting the bags in her cart. Zuri, holding her bear, observed the man at the register. She, too, was unaware of his identity. She saw a man in a gray shirt who, though not shouting, was also not retreating. For a fleeting moment, Malcolm's gaze drifted to the front of Tamara's scrubs, to the badge clipped near her left shoulder, a small white rectangle bearing the hospital logo, with her name printed in block letters. His eyes lingered there for a second, then he looked away. A fleeting expression crossed his face, vanishing before it could be identified. It was the kind of recognition that registers physically before the mind has fully processed it. Vivian did not depart. She did not retreat. She did not lower her voice or retract any of her previous statements. Instead, she reached into her bag, retrieved her phone, and initiated a call. She did not turn away from the register. She did not whisper. She spoke clearly and deliberately, the manner in which one speaks when desiring the entire room to overhear both sides of a conversation that is, in reality, unilateral. "You will not believe what is transpiring at Hartley's right now," she declared. "I am being subjected to harassment, by individuals who clearly do not belong in this establishment, and the staff is doing absolutely nothing to address it." She paused, listened, then continued. "I will ensure this particular branch hears about this. Every single person in corporate will be apprised of what has transpired here today." She directed her gaze at Derek as she spoke, not at the phone. Her words were for the recipient of the call. Her look was intended for him. Derek received it precisely as it was meant. His expression shifted, the practiced composure giving way to a palpable tension. He glanced toward the back of the store, as if seeking an unseen rescuer from the predicament he had helped to create. He turned to Tamara, his voice dropping to an almost gentle tone. It was the sort of gentleness that lacked any true warmth, but desperately sought to be perceived as such. "Ma'am, perhaps it would be simpler if—" Tamara interrupted. "I am almost finished." 4 words. No justification, no negotiation. She inserted her card into the machine and waited for the confirmation beep. Zuri shifted in the cart. She had been remarkably quiet for an extended period, the kind of quiet a 4-year-old maintains when sensing an unease in the atmosphere but lacking the vocabulary to articulate it. She reached up and grasped the sleeve of her mother's scrubs, her small fingers clinging tightly. "Mama, can we go home?" Tamara looked down, and everything shifted. not within the room, but within her. The set of her jaw softened. The tension in her shoulders visibly eased. Her voice lowered into a tone that was warm and gentle, entirely separate from the surrounding events. It was the voice a mother employs when shielding her child from the present environment. 2 more minutes, baby. Mama is almost done. She likely uttered these words every morning at 7:15 when collecting Zuri from Mrs. Patterson's apartment after an 8-hour shift, the same way she probably spoke them when Zuri requested an additional bedtime story, and Tamara, having been awake for 20 hours, still obliged. 2 more minutes, baby. The phrase spoken by a woman who had compartmentalized her life into small, manageable segments and carried each one without requesting assistance, Malcolm observed from his position, unmoved. His hands remained at his sides. His countenance was unchanged. Yet something behind his eyes had altered. He was looking at the small girl in the cart, at the bear with one ear, at the way her fingers clutched the fabric of her mother's sleeve. And for a moment, he was transported elsewhere. To 56th Street, to a kitchen with a cracked window. His mother standing at the stove in the very clothes she had worn to work that day, having had no time to change. A boy inquiring if dinner was nearly ready. His mother turning around and replying in that identical voice, that exact same cadence, 2 more minutes, baby. The machine beeped. The transaction was completed. Tamara withdrew her card, returned it to her bag, and placed the grocery bags in the cart next to Zuri. She then turned the cart towards the exit. She did not glance at Vivienne. She did not look at Derek. She had come to purchase groceries for her daughter. She had purchased them. She was leaving. And it was at this precise moment that Vivienne spoke. She still held the phone, possibly still engaged in the conversation. It mattered little. She addressed the room. She spoke to Tamara's retreating back. Her voice carried sufficiently for Zuri, seated in the cart facing backward, to hear every word. At least teach your daughter not to end up like this. 9 words. Delivered with the calculated precision of someone who had been honing a remark for the past 5 minutes, awaiting the opportune moment for its release. Not a shout. Not a whisper. Delivered with the calculated, unyielding harshness of someone who has never faced consequences for their pronouncements to those they deem beneath them. The retail establishment fell into a profound hush, not merely a reduction in noise. The steady drone of the refrigeration units persisted. A distant scanner emitted a soft ping. Yet every individual in proximity to checkout counter number 4 ceased their activity. Tamara's grip on the shopping cart handle intensified, then relaxed. She did not look back, continuing her progress forward, propelled by the presence of her daughter within the cart. Whatever emotions she experienced in that precise instant, she was determined not to betray them for Zuri to witness. Malcolm gently set his own basket onto the floor, placing it with deliberate care, as one might set aside an object when the task ahead necessitates unimpeded hands and undivided focus. He then stood to his full height, his gaze fixing upon Vivienne before commencing his movement. Not with haste, nor with dawdling, but with a resolute intention. His gait possessed a quality that didn't demand attention, yet subtly reoriented the focus of everyone present. He positioned himself in the space between Vivienne and the designated exit path which Tamara was traversing. He offered no obstruction, simply assuming a stationary stance, and an immediate understanding permeated the space. He would not yield his position until his unspoken purpose was articulated. His initial focus settled on Derek. His voice, calm and even, carried a quiet intensity that required no amplification to be heard. "What is your given name?" Derek's eyes registered a slight flicker. "Derek Hillman. I hold the position of store manager. May I inquire as to the identity of your district manager?" Derek exhibited a brief hesitation. "I can procure that information for you if I will retrieve it myself." He then shifted his attention to Vivienne, his voice remaining unraised, his proximity maintained at the minimum required. From his established position, he regarded her with the focused intensity of someone intending to address a matter with absolute thoroughness and precision, deeming no word expendable. He stated, "You have just informed a mother, in the presence of her child, that the child, should not follow in her footsteps. He paused, not for dramatic effect, but for the gravity of his statement to settle, allowing the sentiment to reside in the atmosphere as it had when Viviane initially vocalized it. Now it was being echoed back, reflected, returned, divested of the vehemence with which she had cloaked it, exposed for its intrinsic nature. I wish for you to apprehend the essence of your words. I desire for you to hear them spoken aloud within this room, precisely as that young girl perceived them just 30 seconds prior. Viviane's smile remained fixed, its animation gone, replaced by the peculiar rigidity of a countenance that had long projected an image of self-assurance, now ill-equipped to adapt when that foundation crumbled. She responded, "My intention was not as Malcolm has described." "You intended it precisely as he has stated," he countered. "Every individual within this space comprehended your precise intent." A profound silence descended, distinct from the usual ambient quietude of a Saturday morning grocery store. This was a different caliber of stillness, the kind that accompanies a pronouncement of absolute truth, requiring the room a moment to process. The woman attending to a toddler in the adjacent aisle abandoned her pretense of perusing the confectionery display. She was now an observer. The gentleman who had previously averted his gaze was now intently watching. Monique, still positioned behind checkout counter number 4, offered a subtle, almost imperceptible nod, the kind of acknowledgement given when a sentiment long held within is finally given voice. Malcolm did not resort to raised tones, nor did he perform an exhibition of indignation. He did not gesticulate with his arms or point a finger, nor did he deliver a discourse crafted for self-validation. He remained steadfast, speaking with clarity, each word imbued with the inherent authority of someone who had spent a lifetime discerning the distinction between overt displays of power and the quiet assertion of presence when it is most needed. In an environment such as this, two forms of silence coexist, that of the dispossessed voice and that of the voice that requires no amplification. Tamara had been enveloped by the former for the preceding 15 minutes. Malcolm now occupied the latter. The divergence between these two states is not measured by sound, but by position and by the collective implicit judgment of who commands belief when words are absent. Tamara had halted near the establishment's egress, adjusting the cart's orientation slightly. She was observing. Zuri, too, was watching. The worn plush bear, its ear askew, rested against the cart's side, while Zuri's small hand was clasped around her mother's wrist. Malcolm's gaze once more drifted to the identification tag adorning Tamara's uniform, reading it this time with focused intent. TOC, Jefferson Memorial Hospital. Though the lettering was diminutive, its clarity was undeniable. He maintained an unmoving posture, his outward demeanor unaltered, yet a profound internal shift was occurring, akin to the subtle disturbance of foundational earth preceding a visible fissure. He recognized that name, not from a formal meeting, nor from a data report. It resonated from his mother's voice, a recollection of a kitchen table conversation mere months prior, when Lorraine Bridgewater, seated opposite him with an untouched cup of tea, recounted the night she believed her life was at its end. She had spoken of a nurse, a young woman, who had held her hand throughout, offering constant reassurance. "I am right here, Mrs. Bridgewater. I am not going anywhere." This extended beyond her professional duties, yet she had remained. She had spoken her name. Malcolm had made a note of it, intending to locate her, to send a token of appreciation, to acknowledge her kindness. However, the weeks had dissolved into one another, as they often do when managing a healthcare system encompassing 3 facilities, employing 4,200 individuals, overseen by a board, convening bi-weekly, and navigating a budget that commands more attention than gratitude. The letter remained unsent, the gesture unmade. The name had been relegated to a notebook on his home desk. T. Ose. And now she stood a mere 10 feet away in a grocery store on a Saturday morning, sporting the identical hospital identification, her hand resting on the handle of a shopping cart containing a 4-year-old girl, a girl who had just been subjected to a deeply hurtful declaration in front of her mother. Something stirred within Malcolm. a sensation that was neither rapid nor gradual, but carried the distinct weight of a deferred obligation arriving at an unexpected juncture. It was the inexplicable way certain occurrences find us, not when we seek them, nor when we are prepared, but when the cosmic balance necessitates rectification. He did not address Tamara directly, not at that moment. He did not approach to introduce himself, nor to reveal his identity or the extent of his knowledge, nor to relay his mother's sentiments. He remained in his position, holding the newfound understanding with the carefulness one affords a fragile object, keenly aware that his subsequent actions held far greater significance than the instant of revelation itself. He turned back to Vivienne, who was still positioned by checkout counter number 4. Her mobile device now rested by her side, the call concluded or forgotten. Her bearing had altered, not a collapse, not yet, but a distinct departure from the unwavering certainty she had exuded upon arrival. An invisible current had shifted within the room, a change she could sense, even if she could not articulate its origin. Malcolm retrieved his own telephone, initiating a brief call lasting no more than 15 seconds. He uttered 2 succinct sentences before concluding the conversation. He returned the device to his pocket and then addressed Vivienne. "Your husband is Gerald Cole of Cole Development Group. He is a member of the fundraising board at Jefferson Memorial Hospital." He paused. "I am aware of this because I hold the position of chairman for that board." The color drained from Vivienne's countenance with the swiftness of water receding from a basin. Her gaze flickered from his attire to his spectacles, to his footwear, regarding him as one might a doorway previously overlooked, unaware of the world it concealed. She attempted to speak, but no sound emerged. Malcolm continued, "I will not dictate the subsequent events. I will not issue threats, nor will I deliver a lecture, nor will I inflict upon you the distress you inflicted upon that woman. That is not the purpose of my presence here." He concluded, "I will allow you the opportunity to contemplate your actions today within this setting in the presence of a child, and I will permit you to determine the individual you wish to be as you depart this establishment." His delivery, consistent with all his pronouncements, was devoid of melodrama or pretense, much like the simple statement of a fact that requires no validation to be true. Vivienne remained stationary for another moment, her fingers tightening around her phone. Her jaw moved as if to articulate a word, but none was spoken. She retrieved her belongings from the counter, turned, and exited Hartley's Organic Market, having made no purchases. The automated doors parted and closed behind her, allowing a fleeting ingress of street noise before its swift disappearance. No one within the store observed her departure. All eyes were fixed upon Malcolm, and Malcolm's attention was directed towards the woman near the exit, her shopping cart, the 4-year-old child, and the identification badge bearing the inscription T.O.S.E. Adjacent to the entrance stood a modest seating area, furnished with 2 wooden benches and a faux botanical specimen in a ceramic pot, a conventional accoutrement designed to suggest customer consideration, though rarely utilized. Malcolm navigated towards it and occupied a bench. He made no request for Tamara to join him. He simply sat. After a brief interval, Tamara guided the cart closer and stood beside the bench, not yet sitting. Zuri reached into one of the grocery bags and retrieved an apple, biting into it with both hands. The crisp sound of the fruit was the most prominent auditory element in that particular section of the store. Malcolm inquired, "Where is your place of employment?" Tamara regarded him, uncertain of his intentions. She had spent the preceding 20 minutes as the subject of strangers' scrutiny and was not inclined to divulge personal details to those she did not know. However, he had stood in line, he had spoken his truth, and now he was seated on a bench in a grocery store with no discernible agenda. She replied, "Jefferson Memorial, night shift, nursing?" He offered a subtle nod. After a brief silence, he continued, "Describe a typical day for you." She hesitated, not due to the personal nature of the question, but because it had been an age since anyone had posed it with genuine interest. Not a physician at the hospital, not a friend, not a caseworker or counselor or supervisor. No one had looked at her and asked, "What does your day look like?" as though they truly desired the answer. She took a seat. I take Zuri to the woman who cares for her at 10 p.m. My shift commences at 11 p.m. and concludes at 7 a.m. I collect Zuri at 7:15. We stop for provisions if necessary. We are typically home by 8 p.m. I sleep from 8:30 until approximately 1 p.m. Then, I am awake with her until 10 p.m. Subsequently, we repeat the cycle. Her recitation was delivered with the factual detachment of someone reading a transit schedule, devoid of overt complaint or any discernible expectation of sympathy. This is simply the outline of my day. It was the manner in which one describes a reality that has long ceased to be questioned, for such an inquiry would demand an expenditure of energy beyond her capacity. Malcolm articulated, "How many nights?" "5. How many hours of sleep?" "4. Occasionally 5, if she sleeps through the night without waking." He fell silent. Zuri took another bite of the apple, a droplet of juice tracing a path down her chin, which she then wiped with the ear of her bear. Malcolm stated, "Why?" "Nursing." Tamara's gaze shifted from Zuri back to him. She explained, "My mother became ill when I was 15. We resided in Camden. She lacked health insurance. She sought medical attention when it was regrettably too late, and they admitted her to a hospital where she remained for 11 days, passing away on the 12th. She paused, not for dramatic effect, but because articulating this memory still exacted an emotional toll even after 15 years. She was frequently alone during those nights. I was underage to remain beyond visiting hours. The nursing staff was overwhelmed. The hospital was critically understaffed. She informed me during one telephone conversation that she had activated the call button on 3 separate occasions and no assistance arrived for 40 minutes. She looked down at her hands. I resolved, at 16 years of age, that I would become a nurse. Not out of a desire to rescue individuals, but because I did not wish for anyone else to endure the solitude of a hospital room at 2 a.m., as my mother did. Malcolm remained motionless. A subtle alteration flickered across his features, though he suppressed its full manifestation. He absorbed her words, much as one receives a substantial weight unexpectedly placed upon their lap. He inquired, "May I pose another question?" She waited. "What is it that you require? Not in relation to today's events, nor concerning that woman's words. What is it that you genuinely need?" Tamara nearly offered a laugh, not from amusement, but because the question was so direct, so simple, and so far removed from anything she had been asked in years that she found herself unequipped to process it. She stated, "I do not require financial assistance." He responded, "I did not offer any." She met his gaze. "People observe the scrubs, the discount coupons, and the child in the cart, and they presume to understand my needs. They imagine I require someone to intervene and rectify my circumstances. I do not need to be fixed. I need the very system within which I operate to function as intended." He listened attentively. She continued, "I require the evening shift from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. so that I may put my daughter to bed at night, so that I may be the one to read her a story, so that she does not awaken at 2 a.m. and reach for me only to find someone else. I have been requesting this particular shift for 7 months. It has never become available." Her statement was delivered without bitterness, without performance, akin to a person stating a fact they have accepted as immutable, even though its persistence is indefensible. Malcolm regarded her, then Zuri. The child had finished her apple and was now holding the core in one hand and the bear in the other. He said, "I may be able to assist with that matter." Tamara looked at him, not with burgeoning hope, but with the practiced caution of someone who had long ago learned that assistance often arrives in an unexpected form and carries an unagreed-upon price. She asked, "How?" He did not address the question directly. "Not at this juncture," he added. "May I share something with you first?" She acquiesced. He revealed, "My name is Malcolm Bridgewater. I am the chairman of the board at Jefferson Memorial Hospital." Tamara became utterly still. Her hand, which had been resting on the cart's edge, ceased its movement. Her expression remained unchanged, yet a profound internal recalibration occurred, akin to illumination within a previously unlit space. She queried, You are the chairman? He confirmed. I am. Her eyes scanned his casual attire, his reading glasses, the basket of groceries still positioned on the floor near checkout counter 4. She remarked, You were purchasing spinach. He almost smiled. Indeed, I was acquiring spinach. A moment passed. Zuri relinquished the apple core into the cart and looked up at Malcolm with the unburdened curiosity of a 4-year-old unfamiliar with the concept of a chairman and entirely unconcerned by it. Malcolm then shared, 3 months ago, my mother was admitted to your hospital at 2 a.m. Her name is Lorraine Bridgewater, room 412. She suffered a minor stroke. The medical team stabilized her by morning, but the individual who first identified the symptoms, who initiated the emergency response, and who remained by her side for 4 hours until my arrival at 6 a.m. was a night shift nurse named Tiosi. He met her gaze. That individual was you. Tamara's lips parted slightly. She blinked then again. She whispered, Lorraine. He inquired, Do you recall her? She responded, The woman who repeatedly apologized for activating the call button. He nodded. She continued, I advised her to cease apologizing. I informed her that the button's purpose was precisely for such instances. Malcolm's voice shifted, becoming slower, more resonant, the way a person's voice deepens when conveying something long, held within, and finally finding release. He stated, My mother spoke of you for weeks. She recounted the experience to me. She shared it with her pastor. She mentioned it to every visitor. She spoke of a nurse who held her hand continuously, who repeatedly said, I am right here, Mrs. Bridgewater. I am not going anywhere. She confided that she had not felt that secure in a hospital setting throughout her entire life. He confessed, I intended to locate you. I recorded your name. I intended to dispatch a letter. I planned to contact the nursing director to ensure your efforts were acknowledged. And then the weeks elapsed, the meetings accumulated, and I failed to act. I failed to perform the single action I should have undertaken. You sustained my mother's hand at 2 a.m. when no one else was present, and today someone subjected you to humiliation in a grocery store, presuming no one was observing. However, I was standing directly there. The store was hushed. The hum of the refrigerators, the distant beep of a register somewhere in another aisle. The Saturday morning continued outside the windows as if nothing out of the ordinary were transpiring within. Tamara's eyes welled with moisture, which she fought to suppress, but which remained evident. She said softly, I was merely performing my duties. Malcolm observed her for a considerable duration. He stated, That is precisely what my mother articulated when I inquired why she had spent 30 years scrubbing office floors so that I might attend medical school. She replied, I was simply doing my job. No further words were exchanged. The sentiment hung between them, possessing the weight of certain pronouncements, not due to their complexity, but because their profound simplicity requires a moment to fully register. Zuri looked up at her mother. She asked, Mama, why are you making that face? Tamara emitted a short, moist laugh, the kind that hovers precariously close to tears and is occasionally mistaken for them. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and said, Because someone said something kind, sweetie. Malcolm said he would like to meet your daughter properly and that he needs to introduce you to someone. Tamara looked at him. Who? He replied, The woman whose hand you held. They journeyed westward through the city. Malcolm's automobile was well maintained but not new, a 4-year-old sedan bearing a minor abrasion on the rear bumper that he had never bothered to repair. Zuri occupied the rear seat in her car restraint, clutching her bear, observing the evolving cityscape through the window with the unreserved attention and lack of commentary characteristic of children. Tamara sat in the passenger seat. She had not immediately assented. She had regarded Malcolm for an extended period in the grocery store, assessing him as she assessed everyone, not by their words, but by their actions. And his action had been to stand in a checkout line and vocalize what every other person in the room tacitly understood but refused to express. That was sufficient for her to enter the vehicle. It was not enough, however, for her to entirely lower her defenses. These were distinct considerations. They turned onto a thoroughfare in Overbrook, a narrow street lined with row houses that had stood for 60 years, front steps where residents gathered in the evenings, small fenced yards, the kind of neighborhood that appears unremarkable from the exterior, yet harbors its most cherished elements within. Malcolm parked in front of a brick residence distinguished by a green door. A small garden graced the forecourt with marigolds lining the walkway. He remained seated for a brief interval before disembarking. He announced, "She is unaware of our impending arrival." Tamara inquired, "Will she be amenable to this?" He responded, "She has anticipated the opportunity to see you again for 3 months. She simply did not know how to locate you." He exited the vehicle. Tamara, with Zuri in tow, emerged from the back seat. The child held her bear in one arm, extending her free hand towards her mother's grasp. They proceeded up the front steps in unison. Malcolm delivered 2 distinct knocks. Footsteps sounded from within, slow and deliberate, accompanied by the distinct tapping of a cane on hardwood flooring. The lock mechanism disengaged. The door swung open. Lorraine Bridgewater stood in the threshold. She was 78 years of age, her left hand supported by a cane. A cardigan was buttoned to the second button. Reading glasses were perched atop her hair. She appeared thinner than she had 3 months prior. The stroke had exacted a toll, yet not on her posture nor in the depth of her gaze. She stood erect. Her eyes were full, warm, and entirely present, the unmistakable eyes of an individual who had dedicated her life to observing the world with keen awareness and harbored no intention of relinquishing that attentiveness. Her gaze first met Malcolm's, then it shifted to the woman standing beside him. A visible stillness came over her. She did not inquire about Tamara's identity. She did not look to Malcolm for an explanation. Her focus remained fixed on Tamara's face, and recognition dawned. "You are my nurse." 3 words spoken softly. The words carried an unwavering conviction, a certainty that transcended mere recollection. It resonated from her very being, emanating from her hands, from the intrinsic understanding that arises when someone has offered steadfast support during your moments of fear. Tamara spoke, her voice soft. "Mrs. Bridgewater." Lorraine's eyes welled up. She made no effort to stem the flow of tears, having long ago abandoned the notion that being moved by emotion was a sign of weakness, especially at her age of 78. She extended her hand, clasping Tamara's. It was the same hand that had clasped hers in room 412 at 2 o'clock in the morning 3 months prior. Then her gaze drifted downward. Zuri stood behind Tamara's leg, one small hand clutching the fabric of her mother's uniform, the other cradling a stuffed bear. The child looked up at Lorraine with an expression of grave consideration, the thoughtful, cautious look of a young one assessing whether a new person posed any threat. Lorraine lowered herself. It wasn't effortless. Her cane wobbled, her knee ached, but she managed to stoop until she was closer to the child's level. "And who is this serious little person?" she inquired. Zuri glanced at her mother, who offered a single confirming nod. The child's attention returned to Lorraine. "I am Zuri," she announced. Lorraine's face lit up with a genuine smile, the kind that originates from deep within and only blossoms on the surface last. "Zuri," she said, "that's a beautiful name. Do you know what it signifies?" Zuri shook her head. "It means beautiful in Swahili," Lorraine explained, "and whoever chose it for you possessed great insight." Tamara looked away for a solitary second. That name had been selected by her own mother, chosen during a telephone conversation from the hospital just 3 weeks before her passing. Her mother had said, "If it's a girl, name her Zuri, because she will be beautiful, and she should always know that from her very first day." At the time, Tamara wasn't even pregnant. Her mother was simply planning for the future, as mothers often do, even from a hospital bed, even with the knowledge that they might not be present to witness it. Lorraine slowly returned to an upright position, her gaze meeting Tamara's. "Please come inside, both of you," she invited. "I made tea this morning, and I've been hoping for someone to share it with." They stepped inside. The home was modest, yet meticulously kept. The living room featured a sofa adorned with a hand-knitted blanket. The kitchen counter held a sugar tin on one side and a chipped blue mug on the other. Above the fireplace, photographs adorned the wall. Malcolm as a boy. Malcolm in a white coat. Malcolm at a lectern. Interspersed among these was an image of a woman in a sanitation department uniform, standing before a row house with her 3 children, her smile radiating warmth that could fill an entire space. Lorraine settled into her armchair by the window. Tamara took a seat on the couch. Zuri clambered up beside her mother, then slid off and ambled over to Lorraine's chair, standing beside it. She placed her bear on the armrest. Lorraine peered down at the toy. "What happened to his ear?" she asked. Zuri replied, "He lost it." Lorraine responded, "Well, he still looks quite dapper." A smile, the first genuine one Zuri had offered since they entered Hartley's that morning, spread across her face. It transformed her entire countenance and seemed to brighten the room itself. Lorraine turned her attention back to Tamara. Her tone shifted, retaining its warmth but gaining an underlying layer of quiet strength. "You stayed with me that night," she said. "I've never forgotten that, not for a single day." Tamara responded, "It was my responsibility, Mrs. Bridgewater." Lorraine countered, "It wasn't your duty to hold my hand for 4 hours. It wasn't your responsibility to repeatedly assure me you weren't going anywhere. It wasn't your obligation to sit in that chair beside my bed when your shift was concluded and you could have gone home." She paused. "I understand the distinction between someone fulfilling their duty and someone choosing to remain. You chose to stay." She continued, "I told everyone. I informed Malcolm. I spoke with my pastor. I even mentioned it to the lady at the grocery store, and she smiled. I likely told the mail carrier as well." Her smile softened, the humor fading, replaced by a more serious expression. "I was terrified that night," she confessed. "I awoke to find my left arm unresponsive, and I couldn't feel half of my face. My immediate thought was, this is it. This is how it ends." Alone in a hospital bed at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Wednesday, she looked at Tamara. "And then you were there, and you uttered 5 words. 'I am right here.' And I believed you. Because the sincerity in your voice matched the steadfastness of your presence, I stopped being afraid." Lorraine reached out and placed her hand on Tamara's. They were aged hands, warm, their skin smoothed by decades of diligent work, the kind of hands that had scoured floors, prepared meals, cradled children, folded laundry, and performed countless quiet, unseen tasks that held a family together. "That is not a minor thing," Lorraine declared. "That is everything." The room fell silent. Malcolm stood near the kitchen entrance, his stillness profound. He offered no words, none were needed. Certain moments transcend the need for a narrator. They simply require a space, 2 individuals, and the truth resting between them, like an object finally set down after being carried for an immeasurable duration. Some individuals erect monuments. Others, at 2 o'clock in the morning, hold hands. The world tends to commemorate the monuments. However, those who found themselves gripped by fear at 2 o'clock in the morning, they are the ones who recall the hands. Outside, Malcolm accompanied Tamara to her car. Zuri was already in the back seat, halfway to sleep, the bear resting on her lap. Her eyelids drooped. It was approaching noon, the sun high in the sky, and the street lay in that particular quietude characteristic of Philadelphia side streets on a Saturday afternoon. Malcolm said, "I'd like to discuss something with you." Tamara met his gaze. She had anticipated this moment, this offer, this gesture. The implicit desire of a man in a position of authority to rectify a situation with the resources at his disposal, for that is the inclination of those who possess such tools. She had already prepared her response. He continued, "The hospital offers a scholarship program for nurses pursuing their nurse practitioner certification. I'd like to recommend you for it. Additionally, there's the matter of your shift request, and I'd also like to assist with Zuri's childcare arrangements." He presented these 3 points as if reading from a list, devoid of fanfare or grand pronouncements, simply laying out the tangible assistance he could provide. Tamara remained silent for a moment before replying, The child care. No. I manage that expense myself. I've always handled it independently, and I intend to continue doing so. He nodded. She then added, regarding the shift, if the evening shift becomes available as a result of a sound operational decision because the scheduling aligns logically and after a thorough review of all requests, mine happens to be selected, then I will accept it. However, if it becomes available due to a personal intervention on my behalf, I will decline. He looked at her, offering no argument, no attempt to explain that a personal call and an operational decision can often blur into one. He simply nodded again. Tamara was quiet for a longer period this time, her gaze drifting to Zuri through the rear window, the child's eyes now completely closed. Then she spoke. The scholarship. Malcolm waited. I've been researching that program for 2 years, Tamara revealed. I visited the website. I've reviewed every qualification. I'm aware of the coursework, the required clinical hours, and the timeline. She paused. I couldn't afford the application fee. Malcolm stated, the application fee is $85. Tamara replied, I am fully aware of its exact amount. The figure hung in the air between them, $85. It represented the chasm between a woman who had dedicated 2 years to research and one who could submit an application. It was the distance between desiring something and being permitted to pursue it. $85 that she simply could not spare, as every cent she possessed was already allocated to ensuring the survival, shelter, and sustenance of 2 individuals. Malcolm offered, this isn't charity. This is the hospital investing in one of its most capable nurses. The program is specifically designed for individuals who have already demonstrated their aptitude and suitability for it. For the first time that entire morning, a subtle shift occurred in Tamara's expression. It wasn't a smile, nor was it a sign of relief. It was something far more subdued. It was the distinct look of someone who has been diligently holding a door shut for an extended period and is now contemplating, even if only tentatively, the possibility that opening it might not necessitate sacrificing what lies on the other side. I will consider it, she said. That's all I'm asking, he replied. In the subsequent weeks, transformations began to unfold, not abruptly, nor accompanied by grand announcements or dramatic gestures, but rather in the way that most significant changes occur. Quietly, through a series of small, incremental adjustments. Malcolm did not personally intercede regarding the shift change. Instead, he took a different approach. He instructed the hospital's HR director to conduct an audit of all outstanding scheduling requests older than 90 days. The audit revealed 47 such requests from nurses, technicians, and support staff that had been submitted through the system but never processed. Some had languished for over a year. Tamara's request was among them, 7 months old. It had been filed correctly, forwarded to the appropriate department, and then, seemingly, vanished. It was neither denied nor approved, merely stuck, a common fate for matters caught in systems designed for efficiency but operated by individuals too overwhelmed to notice what falls through the cracks. The evening shift opened 3 weeks later, not as a result of Malcolm's direct intervention, but because someone finally took the time to investigate. Tamara accepted the position. Her new schedule was from 7 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon. She would drop Zuri off at Mrs. Patterson's by 6:30 and pick her up at 3:15, arriving home by 4. She would prepare dinner, give Zuri a bath, read her a bedtime story, and then put her to sleep. On the first night, she tucked Zuri into bed at 8 o'clock and watched as her daughter drifted off to sleep in the bedroom they shared. Tamara remained seated on the edge of the bed for a considerable time afterward. She didn't cry, nor did she celebrate. She simply sat, much like a person does when a burden carried for years is finally relinquished and the body has not yet adjusted to the absence of its weight. She submitted her application for the nurse practitioner program on a Tuesday. She paid the $85 fee herself, having reduced her expenses for 2 weeks to cover it. She shared this with no one, neither Malcolm nor anyone else. She completed the form at the kitchen table after Zuri was asleep and submitted it at 11:14 at night, then closed her laptop and went to bed. Lorraine began her weekly calls on Wednesdays, promptly at 10 in the morning. She would call Tamara's phone and their conversations would last for 20, sometimes 30 minutes. They discussed the weather, Lorraine's culinary endeavors, a television program Lorraine had watched with a bewildering conclusion, and Zuri's bear, whose ear Lorraine had offered to mend, a proposal Zuri declined, stating the bear was perfectly content as it was. Their conversations encompassed everything except the hospital. That chapter of their story had already concluded. What was unfolding now was something entirely different, something that required no medical chart or room number. It was simply two women, aged 78 and 31, finding each other in the manner that certain individuals do, not by chance but through deliberate observation. Every Sunday, Tamara drove Zuri to Lorraine's house in Overbrook. Zuri affectionately called her Miss Lorraine. She would sit on the floor beside Lorraine's chair, proudly displaying drawings she had created during the week. Lorraine would examine each one with the reverence one might afford a piece exhibited in a prestigious gallery, inquiring about every color and every shape. She kept these treasured artworks in a folder on the side table, nestled beside her reading glasses. Gerald Cole quietly submitted his resignation from the hospital's fundraising board 2 weeks after that particular Saturday. No official statement was released, nor was any explanation provided. His name was subsequently removed from the donor wall in the main lobby on a Thursday afternoon during a period of minimal activity in the hallway. Then, on a Wednesday afternoon in late October, Tamara entered the square grocery store. She had enjoyed 7 hours of sleep. She wore jeans, a sweatshirt, and a pair of new sneakers, not expensive, simply new. Zuri sat in the shopping cart, holding an apple with both hands in the same manner, consuming it. Tamara retrieved a small stack of coupons from her back pocket, handing them to the cashier one by one. She completed the purchase with her debit card, placed the bags in the cart, and walked out the front door into the afternoon sunlight. She had not changed her shopping destination. She had never been the type of person who felt the need to alter her circumstances. Some individuals gauge worth by the contents of their wallets. Others by the actions they perform at 2 o'clock in the morning when no one is observing. Some forms of cruelty are ostentatious, announcing themselves in checkout lines and in the voices of those who have conflated wealth with integrity. Conversely, some acts of kindness are subtle, offering silent companionship beside a hospital bed at 2 o'clock in the morning, holding a hand, uttering 5 simple words, "I am right here." The boisterous cruelty commands attention, filling a space and prompting people to avert their gaze. However, it is the quiet kindness that resonates most enduringly, echoing through years, traversing grocery aisles, city blocks, and entire decades, ultimately finding its way back to the person who offered it. This return is not because the universe meticulously keeps records, but because certain burdens are simply too profound to simply dissipate. You can never truly know who is observing. This is not about keeping score, but rather because every action, every word, every choice made within a group of strangers radiates something into the world that cannot be retracted. Vivian sent something out into the world that Saturday morning. Tamara did the same. And so did Malcolm. The fundamental difference among the three was not wealth, power, or status, but rather what they chose to do when they believed no one of consequence was watching. If this narrative has evoked memories of someone who extended kindness to you during your most vulnerable moments, please share it with them. Do so today, not tomorrow. Subscribe to this channel and activate notifications so you don't miss another story like this one. And please leave a comment below. Tell us, what is the smallest act of kindness someone bestowed upon you that you will never forget? The gesture that cost them nothing yet gave you everything. And one final thought. Was Malcolm's intervention an act of justice? Or was it simply what should occur every single time someone is subjected to such treatment, a scenario we have unfortunately ceased to anticipate? Ponder this. And until our next encounter, remain kind. Stay present and never underestimate the profound impact it has on someone when you simply choose to stay.